Hey everybody, welcome back to One View Review. In this channel, I review movies that I've watched recently and let you know what I think overall. Today, we'll be checking out Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. Starting out, what is this movie about? So this movie follows the story of Cora, who is played by Sofia Boutella, who is shown to live the life of a simple farmer on the moon of a far-off planet. In this reality, there's also a planet called the Mother World, which is a warmongering empire which sends their troops all over the galaxy to not only collect resources for their war, but to also hunt down any possible resistance. One day in Cora's village, a fleet led by the sadistic Atticus Noble shows up to the village which she lives in. They are not here to welcome them to the Empire, but they are looking to extort the resources that they have and to get some additional information on rebels, which Atticus Noble eventually gets from them. While the villagers attempt to impede Atticus Noble from getting their resources and food, Atticus kills the leader of the village and vows to return in a couple weeks for the resources. Atticus Noble also leaves some of the troops behind in the village to make sure that the villagers are getting their supplies. Additionally, not long after setting up camp, the soldiers attack a young girl from the village. Cora, hearing the pleas for help from this girl, decides to investigate. As Cora sees what's happening and wants to stop what's going down, she attacks and kills the soldiers with no sweat at all. She definitely has some secret battle skills and is more than a simple farmer. As it turns out, Cora is a warrior from the Mother World who escaped and is looking for a simpler life on this moon. With the soldiers now dead and Atticus Noble returning for his supplies in a couple weeks, Cora and Gunnar go out looking for fighters and a potential army to help them defend the village from Atticus Noble and his inevitable attack. In general, this is like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones, except the story is straight up General Hospital. Now overall, this makes sense on paper, but on the screen, it just doesn't come out right. A lot of the ingredients are there for a proper story, but they're not combined properly. As far as the acting, I'm not an expert, but it feels like this movie is lacking a lot of emotion. The only ones that show emotion this entire movie were Cora and General Atticus. There are just some scenes that you can tell are meant to be emotional, but from the looks of the characters, they just don't care or aren't paying attention. I'm always curious in times like this if it's a directing issue or the actors just aren't good. In this instance, I'm leaning more towards the directing since some of these actors have been in good movies. Now, speaking of the directing, if you're looking up a review for this movie, you would likely already know this is a Zack Snyder project. He not only directed this film, but he also wrote it as well, so he's a big stakeholder here. Now, there are two types of people that exist on Earth. Those who like Zack Snyder.
Hey, that's pretty good.
And those who don't.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Full transparency, I am not the biggest fan. I wouldn't call myself a hater, I just see him making the same mistakes over several of his movies, especially his most recent ones, and I will be talking about what I believe those mistakes are. So I'll break it down here, I'll do some things that I like, some things I didn't like. I'll try to keep away from spoilers in the first half, but in the latter half of the review, I will be sharing some spoilers. Why don't we start off with the positives, what I did like. One major positive that I'll call out here is definitely the CGI is really good, especially nowadays. It's something that's really easy to mess up. The CGI is either really good or really bad. Think of The Flash that came out not too long ago. The CGI was horrendous. In Rebel Moon, whether it's the ships, the planets, the robots, or the alien characters, they all tend to look pretty solid and believable. At no point was I like, this looks like crap, so thumbs up there. So overall, that's a positive. Another small positive that I'll call out are some of the twists later in the movie. While they are interesting, they can be a little familiar, if not a little predictable. It was one of the few times that the movie was actually holding my interest. Last positive that I'll really call out are the final battle. The final battle itself is pretty engaging, even though a lot of the characters aren't really fleshed out. Outside of focusing on the plot, the action scenes do tend to be pretty engaging and interesting to watch. Something that has been said by other reviewers in the past about Zack Snyder's work. Now, talking about some things that I didn't enjoy in this movie, there are so many exposition scenes with just sad music in the background in the beginning of this movie that it's insane. If you've watched Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It just looks like they have this vast world that they're clearly looking to spread out over several movies, and for some reason, they want to squeeze in all the exposition in the first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie specifically. The problem is that they didn't wisely use the time in the latter half of the movie. There are just a ton of unnecessary scenes or scenes that go on too long in the second half. I did mention Star Wars earlier, and it does seem that a lot of the ideas or general concepts in this movie do parallel those from Star Wars movies. A young fighter whose home was attacked by a larger evil empire and they both go out to seek help.
He copied my whole fucking flow!
Yeah, and that's not even the end of the comparisons between the two. In today's day and age, I think it can be hard to differentiate between plagiarism and inspiration, but this one is towing the line super thin. This movie also has a lot of the Zack Snyder classics, from the shooting style to the slow motion during the fight scenes. Now this can be a positive or a negative depending on your thoughts on Zack Snyder. Like I mentioned earlier, the action can be good, but some of the camera tricks used by Zack Snyder can be a little bit overused by the end of the movie. Part of the movie includes adding new characters to the team who are eventually going to help defend the village. They meet all of these new characters. They all must go through some sort of trial to prove that they are worthy of being added to the team. The problem is that there's near zero exposition on these characters. They kind of just show up. They do a trial that's supposed to feel earned, but it's really not. Remember, we don't know them. This trial could just be another Tuesday for them. Along with that, a lot of the reasons for some of these characters joining the team are super flimsy. They basically all boil down to, oh, I'm a good guy, so I gotta help. Why would I help these people at all? I have my own problems I gotta solve. Also, some of the new characters mention some form of compensation if they help defend the village, which is never really fleshed out. Somebody just brings it up at a certain point in the movie, and maybe I missed something, but I'm like, they never talked about this, so why is it coming up? So again, no real development for these characters that we're supposed to care about. No scenes of them being friendly or hitting it off or hearing some sort of backstory. This reminds me of the first Thor movie where they introduced all of the side characters that are supposed to be his friends. We never really get to know them. So when they die in later movies, we're like,
we do not care.
So now we're going to dig into some spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, please skip ahead to the timestamp. But we're going to start digging into it in 3, 2, 1. What was weird to me was that one of the soldiers that was part of the Motherworld team that stayed on the village went rogue and helped Korra defeat all of his allies. It's just interesting to me that he switched sides so easily. There was no real backstory. He just kind of hated his platoon. And after he helped fight his fellow soldiers, he just kind of disappears. Is he part of the village now? Where did he go? He's just kind of gone. And that happens in a couple parts of this movie where some characters are just gone. If they wanted to, they could have pulled a Finn from Rise of Skywalker and he could have joined the search for new team members. But nope, he just disappears into the trees. I guess Zack Snyder wanted to avoid even more parallels to the Star Wars movies. Also, there's a robot during the same battle that helps them fight the soldiers in the village. And again, he just kind of walks off after the battle. He could have joined the team as well. At the end of the movie, they did tease that he was still in the village or around the village somewhere. There was an exposition scene with the robots that made it seem like they would either be a bigger part of the movie or be the ally or show up at some point. I'm guessing that's just something that's going to be more talked about in a future movie. I think this movie just needs to slow down and trim the fat accordingly. I desperately want more character building for the team members that join the battle. It's possible, like the Justice League, that Netflix cut down a bunch of scenes for Rebel Moon, and they're waiting to release the Rebel Moon Snyder Cut in 2026. I just wanted more character interactions, really. Another thing that was interesting to me was, like I mentioned before, the story was about helping defend the village from the Mother World when they return, and I can't help but think, what is the end game here? It is shown several times in the movie that the Motherworld has clearly superior weapons to anything that the village could have, and even above that, they just have the sheer numbers. So what happens in the next movie? They defeat the Motherworld soldiers and live their lives like they'll never come back? They're coming for you, big dog. They're just going to bomb the village with the nuclear weapons they've shown to clearly have in multiple scenes. I just don't understand how they're going to stop them. Another call out was regarding Nemesis, who is the samurai lady who joined the team. As part of her trial to join the team, she has to fight some sort of half woman, half spider thing that has a child hostage. What's interesting is that multiple times in her trial, she's inches away from being killed, and the rest of the team, like 5 other people, are just watching. Are these really the good guys if they just let this lady they just met die? Shouldn't they be jumping in to help her? But no, they gotta stand there and just watch her. Last thing I'll call out, so near the end of the movie, the space pirate Kai says before they can go to the village and give it their all that he has to drop off some supplies for a trade. When they get to the depot to drop off the supplies, Kai ends up betraying them and turning them into Atticus Noble and the Motherworld soldiers. Now, when I watch this scene, I can't be the only one who thought of the parallels between Cloud City and Lando Calrissian from The Empire Strikes Back. So in this movie, they go to a floating city where one of their friends betrays them and turns them into the Empire. I mean, Atticus Noble. And the characters manage to fight back while the main villain and the main protagonist have a final battle.
Word for word, bar for bar.
In this movie, technically Korra wins because Atticus Noble ends up falling to his death. So maybe not a 1-for-1 copy of Star Wars, but come on, man. You serious? So yeah, there's just a lot of gripes that I have with this movie overall. So like I mentioned earlier, it's got a lot of potential and a lot of things that could have been good, but the execution just wasn't quite there. A couple things that maybe would have helped. I think that this would have been much better as a TV show rather than multiple movies. I would have liked to see the side characters interact a lot more, joke, talk to each other, have a drink, just become more friendly overall. Something that shows that they're actually a team and not just a bunch of mercenaries. Give them all an arc where they have to fight some internal battle or some external foe. Another thing is we never fell in love with Korra's village or her life. It feels like the villagers could have just picked up and left at any point and would have been safe. Would have been nice to expand on that and maybe develop a couple more characters within the village itself. And this has all the hallmarks of a Snyder film, whether the good or the bad.
How does
Zack Snyder
keep getting work?
I am curious where the story goes from here. Let's hope they learned a lesson from this one and fix some of the issues going forward. Overall, I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. I think it's right in the middle. Not great, not awful, just okay. But for now, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton. And we'll see you in the next one. Later.